بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. وصلي اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. الحمد لله رب العالمين. My apologies, we were actually had a dinner with some people from the government, so we were in a sam'an wa ta'atan mode, so I apologize. Inshallah, we're gonna go through as much of the Kitab al-Ilm as possible in the short time that we have. But before we do that, I think many of you are probably very familiar with Imam Al-Ghazali, but they say عند ذكر الصالحين تنزل الرحمات. When you make mention of righteous people, there's mercy descends. So it's good to go over some of the salient features of his life. One of the benefits of the tabaqat literature, which is the biographical literature of the scholars, is that it instills in you, first of all, a desire to be like them, because we're an imitative species. We tend to aspire to virtue by our nature, because we have a nature that aspires to virtue. So when you read about virtuous people, and then when you see them, it's unfortunately these people are far less common, but there still are some people within our ummah, fortunately, that have the qualities of the people that we've read about in the past, so that we know that they're real. Because sometimes the hagiography, there's a tradition that sometimes seems exaggerated when you read about it. You read about virtuous people that would pray Fajr with the wudu of Isha, and you think, is that really true? Or people that read the Quran every 3 days. But having personally known people like that, I know that it's possible because I've seen it with my own eyes. Also, the photographic memories that some of these scholars had, I've seen in some of the teachers that I've had memories that are just really astonishing. So, and then fortunately, unfortunately for us, he's not here this year, but in the past we've had Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya, who in many ways is the Ghazali of his time, or the Shatibi of his time. He's certainly in his writings, and for some of you who might be fortunate enough to be able to read Arabic at that level, what's notable about his writing is, one, if you're accustomed to reading these scholars, he's writing in a very similar style and level of erudition, but he's also part of the conversation. And this is the conversation of the scholastic conversation that the ulama have over time. So ulama of the present, who are oceans of knowledge, have tended to read the best of what's gone in the past. So in any subject that they master, usul al-fiqh would be an example. Anybody who masters usul al-fiqh would have had to have read Imam al-Shafi'i's great work on usul al-fiqh, which begins the science of usul al-fiqh. And then they would have had to have read the great usuli scholars of Islam, most prominent amongst them, people like Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni, Imam Al-Ghazali himself, Imam Al-Qarafi, Imam Al-Shatibi, and then you have the derivative scholars of usul, who aren't really original, don't have original contributions, but either abridge or modify something that's been written from another madhab in their own madhab, like Ibn Qudama in the Hanbali madhab. So I want to talk a little bit about Imam Al-Ghazali and why he's important. About his life, he was born in 450 in the Hijrah calendar. And his life, surprisingly, was not long by today's standards. I'm actually older than he was when he died. But he was born into a very poor family. Some say his name is actually Ghazali, with a shadda, from Ghazal, which is a carder of wool, which is what his father did. And others say it's from Ghazala, which was a small suburb of a village in the area of Tus, which is currently in northern Iran. He had a brother, Ahmad, who becomes a scholar and is more noted for his Sufism and his poetry than Imam Al-Ghazali. But his father was a very simple man, but he loved the ulama. And he did not have the opportunity to study when he was young, but he really loved knowledge and he loved the ulama. And so he used to serve them. And because of that, some of the Qawm say that he was given these two great sons by Allah out of his love for the ulama, Allah, and his service towards them. He was given these sons, but he died when Imam Al-Ghazali was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and he left in his will a small amount of money that he had, and entrusted a very pious man in the village to take care of him and his brother. But that money ran out pretty quickly, and so the man who was caretaking for the two of them actually put them in a madrasa, because in those days you could go to a madrasa and you would get bread and water and maybe some soup and lodgings. And so Imam Al-Ghazali was famous for saying, تعلمت العلم لغير الله فأبى أن يكون إلا لله. I learned knowledge for other than the sake of Allah, but knowledge refused to be other than for the sake of Allah. In other words, that he entered into the madrasa because he needed a place to live and eat as a young boy. But his knowledge ended up being for Allah, even if that wasn't the original intention. His first teacher, he had one, Ibn Saraj and Al-Razkari. These two were probably, he surpassed them pretty quickly. He then went, when he was still very young, he went to Nisapur, which was part of the Seljuk. And the Seljuks have different, like this was part of the Seljuk dynasty, but the Seljuks, there's the Seljuks of Central Asia, the Seljuks of Sham and Iraq, and then the Seljuks of Anatolia. So they're all from the same ethnic group, but they actually have different centers of their empire. And the Seljuks here were in power. They were a great dynasty, and they were great defenders of the Sunnah. And they were up against the occultic element of the Hermetic botany element that threatens orthodoxy. So they actually fought that element, and Imam Al-Ghazali aligns with them. But he went and he studied, before he reached 20, he went and he studied in Nisapur, and he had some great teachers, but he surpassed them all. There's no teacher that he had that he would eventually surpass him, including Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni. So when he was on his way back to Tus, he had spent I think 3 or 4 years studying, and he had what are called ta'liqats. These are like his notes, and he had them in a like a sack that he was carrying, and the caravan that he was in was seized by brigands, and he writes that one of the thieves took his mikhla, his bag, and he asked the head of the thieves if he would tell him to give him back his bag. And the man said, why should he do that? And he said, he asked him by Allah, he said, I just spent several years gathering all this knowledge, and if he takes it from me, it'll be a disaster for me. And the thief laughed at him, and he said, what kind of knowledge is that a thief like me could steal it from you? That's not real knowledge. If I could steal it, it's not knowledge. And Imam Al-Ghazali said, هذا منطق أنطقه الله ليرشد به أمري. This is a logic that God inspired him to speak in order to guide me. And then he gave him back his ta'liqat, and he went and he spent 3 years memorizing everything he had learned. And he swore that he would never study anything except that he would put it to memory. And he had a phenomenal memory, but this is what he did. So after this, he begins to study with Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni, Imam al-Haramain. And Imam al-Haramain is a very important figure in our tradition, because he takes usul al-fiqh. And what's important to note is Imam al-Ghazali is considered by many a Sufi. The reality of it is that he was probably one of the most, I think, really striking critics of Sufism. If you read in the Ihya, if you read At-Tabyin, you will see that he's actually, in fact, he ends his book At-Tabyin on a chapter on the Sufis, and he said that, you know, of all these different groups he's been talking about, this is the most deluded group. Are the Sufis. And he talks about the delusion of the Sufis in their belief that they're the elect, the delusion of the Sufis in the way they dress. He talks about the fact that they use the religion for worldly gain, that they were often filled with pride in their hearts. So he's very critical of Sufism, but there's an important distinction, and I'll get back to the usul in a second. There's an important distinction. The first part of our ummah, there was a group called the Sufiya. The Sufiya of this first period are accepted largely by the entire scholastic community of Muslims. And to say they're not is just a lie. So people like Abu Yazid al-Bustami, Ma'ruf al-Karhi, Sari al-Saqati, Imam al-Junaid, Imam al-Qushayri, Abu Nu'aym, many of these early people, Abu Talib al-Makki, all of these men are considered imams and recognized. Also, Sidi Abdul Qadir Jilani, Ibn Taymiyyah says that his miracles are mutawatira. They're factual statements, historical statements that should be considered fact. So this idea that tasawwuf is a bid'ah or an innovation in the religion is very alien to the tradition. To say that is alien. But that does not mean that everyone who calls himself a Sufi is somehow acceptable. On the contrary, there is a lot of deviance in tasawwuf and amongst the Sufis. And Imam Al-Ghazali has been criticized in this late period by some for being a Sufi, as if that was some kind of a shameful thing. But that was not. And the laqab Sufi can be found amongst the muhaddithin. We have the Quran, the asanid of the Quran. You will find Sufis in the asanid of the Quran. You will find Sufis in the asanid of the hadith. So the religion has been transmitted by people that had that laqab and that were part of that tradition. And to deny that is really to deny something that is just undeniable. And Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah are used sometimes as to attack tasawwuf. But the reality of it is that the tasawwuf, even the name, is accepted by Ibn Taymiyyah. It's accepted by Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah did a commentary on Abdullah al-Ansari's famous work, a Hanbali, great Hanbali scholar and a Sufi, who wrote Manazil al-Sa'irin. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah did a commentary on that. He talks about fana and baqa, which are concepts that Imam Junaid articulated, but believed that they were Quranic concepts. So tasawwuf, like other sciences, emerged with technical terms. But Imam Al-Ghazali is not primarily a Sufi, and this is important to remember. He is first and foremost, probably after Imam Shafi'i, the most important Usuli scholar in the history of Islam. And the Mustasfa, his Mankhul, when he wrote his Mankhul, because he wrote several books in Usul, when he wrote his Mankhul, his teacher Imam Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni said, Dafani wa ana hayy. He buried me and I'm still alive. In other words, he surpassed me and my work. Imam al-Juwayni introduced the universals, the concept of that Islam came to preserve these 6 universals. There are 5 in his articulation. Some of the later scholars added a 6th, which is the ird. So hifdhu dinan, thumma nafsan, mal, nasab, ومثله عقل وعرض قد وجب, like Imam Laqani says, that the hifdhu din, preservation of the religion, preservation of the self, of life, preservation of wealth, property, preservation of family, preservation of the intellect, and preservation of dignity, human dignity. These are the 6 universals that Islam came to preserve and protect. And everything in our usul can be reduced to the protection of one of these 6 universals. There's no commandment or prohibition in Islam that's not rational. None. All of them are rational. Some of them have what's called hukm ta'abbudi. In other words, the rational meaning is not understood by us. For instance, why we pray 3 rak'ats at Maghrib and 2 at Subh. We don't know. But we know why we pray rak'ats. That's rational. So the other one, we believe there's a hikmah in it, but it's been hidden from us. Some people have explored those things, but generally there's nothing in our tradition that would be definitive. So, but what Imam Al-Ghazali does in usul, and I once asked Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya, who is, I think, and it's not my opinion, but the opinion of people far more worthy of me to assess this amongst usuli scholars, that he is the preeminent usuli scholar of our time. And his books are clear indications of that. Amari al-Dilalat, the Mashahid min al-Maqasid, his book on Fiqh al-Aqalliyat, Maqasid al-Sharia. He's written several books in usul that are not just repeating things that have been said many, many times before, but he's actually doing 2 things. He's taking from the tradition the best of what's gone in the past, but then he's also having his own tarjihats and his own original insights into things. So he's in that way, really a mujaddid of usul al-fiqh. But I asked him once that if he could only have one book of usul from all the books that have been written, which one would he take? And he said, Al-Mustasfa of Imam Al-Ghazali. What's interesting, especially for some of the modern Hanbalis that attack Imam Al-Ghazali, is that the most important Hanbali text that's studied by students of the Hanbali madhab is called Rawdat al-Nadhir, which is Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi's famous book. It's studied in Saudi Arabia now, in Medina, and that is basically an abridgment of the Mustasfa. So what makes Imam Al-Ghazali unique? There's a few things that he does in Usul al-Fiqh. First of all,